living in a gangster's paradise. Welcome to part 3 of the Australian Security Academy's risk management presentation for CPP, Certificate 3 in Investigative Services, compliance for the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division, 24 hours of online face-to-face instruction. This presentation covers 7 different qualifications that we do at the Australian Security Academy, RTO 30547, the investigation, government fraud control, government investigation, loss adjusting, and workplace health and safety specialist, registered training organisation. It also covers up to 14 units, which we teach and assess. Now, in this presentation, it follows on from our first one, which was the context, our second one, which was the identification of risk. And here we're going to put it together for you and give it a little bit of context before we move on to countermeasures. So we're going to look at the how, who, and why of risk management in this presentation. Now, this presentation was put together by an Australian Security Academy graduate and instructor, and we'll go through it so you can get the context of this, how it applies to yourself, how it applies to a government department, how it applies to an organisation. So we're talking about risk in the internal environment. That's your organisation, where you work or you are a consultant for. Risk is about something going wrong. Corporations and government use compliance with legislation, acts, law, standards, standard operating procedures, policies and procedures to anticipate, avoid, transfer or mitigate risk. So that's what businesses and government do. They plan for something to go wrong and they can get insurance to transfer the risk. They can put in a guardrail to mitigate the risk of someone putting their arm into a piece of machinery. Respect for risk. At the heart of a culture of compliance is respect for risk and the anxiety of its mismanagement. The overriding themes are fear of consequences of a badly managed risk and vigilance where risks may lay. Now, for the private investigators watching this, you are going to become a licensed private investigator in your state. So therefore, the government is going to do a criminal history check on you to see that you're a suitable person to hold a private investigator's license and go into various corporations and get confidential information, take it back to the office and report on that accident, incident, or whatever happened. So that is a respect for risk that the government demands and that you comply with so you can do your job as a private investigator. Today's risk environments have become more severe, complex and interdependent, both nationally and globally. With cybersecurity, the risks are almost instant. The proper management of these environments is a fundamental requirement of sound corporate governance. We have privacy rules. Your corporation can't be hacked and your client's information stolen and put up on the dark web and sold. So we have processes and policies and procedures to prevent that through risk management. Stakeholders require you to identify and anticipate areas of risk. Stakeholders include government compliance professionals and set in place cohesive strategies to mitigate or at least reduce risks. And then, most importantly, they expect you to monitor them. Now, if you don't monitor a risk and it's seen to be unmonitored by corporations or by government departments, then it can all get out of hand. This is why we have speed cameras. They monitor your speed going down that hill in that school zone with those speed cameras, and they send you a fine in relation to it. So they understand that people are going to lose concentration, they are going to speed in certain areas, and it's going to be monitored, and they're going to send the message, if you keep doing it, we're going to fine you more, and we're going to take your license off you eventually. So wake up and comply. Compliance is about risk management, develops a control environment. That's the compliance. This control provides reasonable assurances to the board, senior management, the minister, either federal or state, that specific objectives will be achieved within acceptable degrees of residual risk. So you want to travel from Melbourne to Devonport via the TT line. They must have workplace health and safety procedures and policies in place in case of an accident. That will satisfy the state government of Victoria and Tasmania that if you buy a ticket, then you will get on that boat with your vehicle and you'll get off that boat with your vehicle, and both of you will be intact, boat and vehicle at the other end. And the government wants to ensure that. So they license the operators of that vessel and they check the workplace health and safety. They check the maintenance of that vessel. They check the qualifications of the captain, pilot, and the crew. So they're some of the compliance issues that might relate to that particular transport context. So the purpose of them is to identify, prevent, respond to breaches of operating procedures and processes, to promote a culture of compliance and assist the client stakeholder to be a good provider. So if you run a business and it's manufacturing, the Treasury Department of your state will be very interested through your accountant that you are paying your staff the right wage, you are meeting your commitments to their staff benefits, such as holiday leave loading, also their superannuation, and you're paying them the correct rate for whatever they do, whether it's casual, full-time, part-time, whatever. So by doing that, you're a compliant business person. So where does it fit in good corporate governance? Risk analysis plus risk treatments plus implementation of treatments plus compliance with those treatments equals assurance of good corporate governance to those who have to regulate it. Let's have a look at a simple example of implementing compliance. Let's say your organisation has just been awarded the contract to transfer prisoners from prison to court, and you work under the Transfer of Prisoners Act 2018, which is an act I just made up. So we've got to list the systems we will introduce within the organisation to ensure compliance and monitor compliance of the transfer of prisoners from prison to court. Examples of things that we could put in place after we looked at context yesterday and what the risks were this morning, identifying them. We can have meetings. We'll have a meeting agenda. We'll organise who attends. We will look at how minutes are reported and to who. We will get our risk management plan together. We will discuss our compliance activities and how we're going to monitor them. The meetings would be of mandatory attendance, and this will embed a culture of compliance throughout. So staff know that if it is important to the director of the organisation, it better be important to them as well. Minutes to the managing director every week as a result of those meetings as they are conducted, executed and planned. They'll look at escorts and movement, registers and logs, reception, access control, which is vital, the seizure register, searches, any other activity which becomes the focus of attention. Possible compliance activities reviewed at the meetings may include workplace health and safety inspections, budget tracking, any work cover claims as a result of physical incidents, absences, investigations, performance reviews, complaints. Are the staff making complaints about how this is operated in relation to safety? Operational compliance, firearms, high-profile prisoners, so you might have a celebrity or a mass murderer that everybody hates, X-ray training, equipment registers. These are checked weekly or how? Is it going to be daily, weekly, I would assume that firearms is going to be something that's checked daily. The benefits of compliance from that little exercise that we just did. It introduces the concept of inherent control. Reliance on formal control is reduced because the concept goes right down to the people at the coalface from the boardroom. There is ownership, therefore, by all the stakeholders all the way down and all the way back up. There's a greater focus on performance and less on compliance. So through this method, you are fighting less fires in your risk management compliance activities. And these are the things that you've got to be able to communicate to auditors, or if there is a complaint, to the Office of Fair Trading, or the Workplace Health and Safety Officer, so Safe Work Victoria or Safe Work Queensland, or the Transport Accident Commission, that sort of thing. You can show that you've got these things in place and you monitor them. So there's key challenges in implementing these compliance programs and integrating it with your risk management. Has your team established strategies for addressing significant risk? Is your team committed to leadership by example? Are controls adjusted as new risks and deficiencies emerge? So when you go from a paper-based record system to a digital record system, have you put in the cybersecurity that's required for that? So going from paper-based to digital, is a new risk adjusted as a deficiency in your security may emerge? Now, hopefully that wouldn't be an issue today, but for a lot of organisations 20 years ago, that was a very big issue. But it's a small example of one just to consider. Is there a robust framework for compliance? Is ongoing development demonstrated? How is compliance tested and reported? Now, we talked about this in the preceding presentation where we did penetration tests. We looked at previous incidents, that sort of thing. So we looked at how other people can be take ownership for this and be involved in reporting, identifying risks. So how is compliance tested and reported, and how do you know? For the ideal compliance elements to exist, there must be a no-nonsense commitment from the directors, managers to standards and compliance, and to take a corrective action and ensure effectiveness of corrective actions and their closure. Weekly, structured, minuted meetings chaired by the manager will help to facilitate that. Explicitly stated policies and standards and positions on each area of risk. Training and refresher training for all staff on code of conduct and standards. Designation of compliance officer with appropriate authority and expertise. So here you have accountability coming into it. Who's accountable? Adequate training for additional internal auditors. That might relate to safety. It might relate to stock control and anti-theft of stock. It might relate to handling of dangerous goods, chemicals, explosives. It might relate to licenses to operate machinery or vehicles, or vessels sailing from Melbourne to Devonport, for example. Regular monitoring and auditing processes to test compliance. So nobody goes to sleep at the wheel. It's monitored and it's audited and it's reported. Systems to communicate corrective actions, follow-ups undertaken and closures. So again, who's going to be accountable for the corrective action? Who's going to be accountable for following up on that? And who's going to be accountable for saying it's done, it's closed? Mechanisms to enforce rules and discipline procedures. Capacity to identify and introduce hot topics into the compliance framework. Adequate oversight at corporate level of the compliance function. You can coach your team to conduct risk assessments of the operation. Now, it does not have to be a whole of operation, it's a big one. It may be just the car park for one area. Then it could be the change rooms or the entry for another area. Now, they coordinate their results at the end, but some people might be involved just on the shop floor of the workshop for their risk assessment, because they don't have anything to do with packaging and delivering out the back door. That's going to be a separate one again. So there's going to be discussion on the assessment. They will develop and agree on the fixes, agree on how to implement the fixes, monitor the fixes, ensure they work, and brief the team on progress and coach it weekly. Now that keeps your team fit, just like a football team or a netball team or a hockey team. They're constantly practicing for that, and they're continuously improving in their skills with identifying the risk and reporting it, following it through, taking corrective action. Your role as the manager of the risk for that organisation or as a consultant to it is to question everything. Probe the facts. Don't just accept, we are fact checkers and we found that that might be 25% incorrect. What you've got to do is look for the knowledge, skill, training, or attitude gap that led to any deficiency that resulted in an injury, an incident, or a theft. So you go and probe the facts in relation to that. Can't happen without a day, date, and time. So who left the door unlocked? Who didn't turn the CCTV on? You must identify weaknesses and processes and proposals and strategy. You'll find that if a government department is ripped off by an internal accountant for millions, that government department will immediately implement a two-person sign-off on all checks written. That's what they do. They've identified a one-person sign-off as a weakness, and they will therefore go for two people doing that in their strategy. You must challenge assertions and assumptions. Now, these may be in relation to culture, race, it could be anything. So challenge any assertions and assumptions. If you assume that your staff have nothing to offer and they're working in that area on a 24-hour shift, I am sure they are going to have a lot to offer in relation to improvements to the risk management and the compliance of the organisation. Clarify ambiguity. Check. Why does this person know it's like that? How do they know it's like that? How do they know that that is safe? Why are they saying it's safe? Have they checked behind it? Have they checked above it? Have they checked for access by someone who might want to access that area? Have they considered the possibility of sabotage? And how do they know that they've mitigated that risk? Clarify hidden meanings and purpose. Now, in government in particular, there are little camps of people over here and little camps of people over there. This camp supports the Prime Minister. This camp supports the 65-hour-a-week fortnight through the union. And this camp over here supports the get on the booze every Friday night at 5 o'clock down at the pub. So they have little hidden meanings and agendas for what they're doing. So try as best as you can to see what might be there and what's the purpose of it. Cut through any spin that's given to you. Knowledge, skill, training, or attitude, information or attitude gap. We'll expose that. People don't do what we expect, that they will do what we inspect. We did discuss this in the previous presentation, so keep asking the same question over and over again. How do you know? you've just presented me this wonderful 2-page risk management plan with these beautiful coloured diagrams on it that say this and say that and say it's possible or it's probable. It will be disastrous or it'll be minor. How do you know? What research did you do? What experiments did you do? What walkthroughs, observations did you do to get to those conclusions? The benefits: it's more effective strategic and operational planning, enhanced organisational resilience, which improves lost time fighting fires and improves potential to exploit opportunities, greater confidence in decision making, and improved stakeholder confidence. How do you know? That is the important theme of this presentation. When you get the security risk management plan handed to you that existed prior to your responsibility to go in and take it over for that government department, state or federal, local, that organisation, small, medium or big, that event, the local footy grand final, the nuclear power plant, the New Year's Eve celebrations on Sydney Harbour, how do you know that those things in that plan are going to work? We'll be back with looking at countermeasures in presentation number 4 of this series on risk management for CPP 30619, Certificate 3 in Investigative Services, in association with Spy Curious, AIRLAP, the Academy of Investigation, Loss and Risk and Loss Adjusting Professionals, and the Australian Security Academy, RTO 30547. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy, and hey, don't subscribe, don't like, Google Spy Curious for me. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.